Always nice to start with music. We're going to turn that off. Welcome. I see some familiar faces and hopefully some new faces here. Judith is dialing in from New York. Happy to see you there. Rita, probably from Boston, maybe somewhere else in the world. And I see some new names and faces. We're excited you're here. I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, but we're going to introduce ourselves first. You have joined not a cooking class, but a message mindset clinic for 45 minutes on best practices for values-based interpretation. So I am joined here by 3 other trainers, and together we have taught hundreds of the certificate for interpretive guiding classes, hundreds of students, over 100 classes collectively. So the knowledge here is quite large, and I'm glad they're all here, and I'm hoping they'll join us. I have Kristen Robinson here, so if you just want to wave, Nikki Rhodey here as well, and Gabby calling all the way from France. We're excited you're here. We started a couple of years ago to fill our interpretive guide classes, and this has developed into a friendship and opportunities for learning and training both with each other. And we've decided to expand that and offer this to you as well because it's been so helpful to us as we've had conversations on what's worked, what hasn't, and what we do differently. So we're excited you're here. This is the first time that I've actually taught on this subject. But before we get started, I would love for you to take a minute and introduce yourself either in the chat. I will put this in the chat. You can, if I can see the chat. I love how Zoom updates and does all sorts of fun things. Share your name, share where you're working or where you're from, and what is one word that comes to mind when you think about shared values. This is going to be a really interactive discussion. So I would love for you to unmute and turn on your cameras. You'll get so much out of it.
Did we freeze?
I don't think you froze. Hi, Robert. Glad you're here. So take a minute. I see Selena, you're from the International Museum of Art and Science. Welcome. Welcome. Are you based in Texas? And you must be a colleague of Faith's. So, hi. No access to mic or computer, but I'm only able to join on the chat. I'm so glad you're here, Selena. And I do believe you probably work with Faith. And please tell Faith I said hello. Yay. Anyone else want to introduce yourself? Judith, NYC Parks. We've got an urban park ranger, shared values, support. Thank you. Katie Bradley, Westminster Open Space, a fellow Coloradan connection. Welcome. It's good to see you, Katie. Dave Duncan, CIG program here at local high schools in Borrego Springs, California. Welcome, Dave. So glad you're here. Rita, Zoo New England, and an NAI trainer. Nikki Rhodey, Phoenix, Arizona. One word, curiosity. I love that. And Robert, you unmuted for a second. Feel free to share where you're from, either unmuting or putting it in the chat. Joanna, as well as Rosemary, we'd love to have you join this conversation. Joanna, New Orleans, on mute because you're being barraged with messages, communication on mutual learning. So glad you're here. Hopefully you'll get a little lagniappe out of this. Love your site. I grew up in Louisiana, so I'm very fond of that state. I grew up in the Southwest side, though.
Have I been on a webinar with you before? You seem very familiar.
You do too.
Were you on one of Tim Merriman's heart
Yes.
training? Okay, that's why I know you. Okay. Nice
Good
to
to
see
see
you.
you. Kristen, yay. Kristen's from Bethel, Connecticut. No cat today. Hoping for a
He's
cat.
sleeping.
Sleeping. One word, bridges. Well, I'm excited to talk about this. I don't know how much we're going to get through, because I have a lot to share, but I really value your input as you go along. As I said, I am beta testing this. This is new for me. So I know that there's several seasoned people in here, and I look forward to you sharing your knowledge. So, why values-based conversations? What are values? What do you think about when you hear the word values? Values are fundamental beliefs. They are deeply held convictions that shape behavior, they shape decisions, and it shapes our interactions with the world. Our values act as a framework for prioritizing what's essential. And in values-based interpretation, we recognize that these values influence how people interact with others and how they build connections. And why is that important? Well, we can prioritize what's important in a visitor's understanding. We can consider strategic dialogue, what perspectives might be coming in, what counter arguments might be coming in. So in our conversations, we can promote collaboration, problem solving to foster deeper connection, both with our organization and with our community. So I am going to start out with a question, and this is where it's your turn. What's the one visitor interaction you still think about? Take a minute. You are welcome to answer that in the chat. And why did it stay with you? I can share mine. I will never forget this. A few years ago, I was working as the environmental educator for the Department of Natural Areas here locally. And I set up a hike for 600 freshmen to hike the A. It was in their first week of school. It's about a 3-mile hike, and we had a table, an information table that was set up at the entrance of the hike that was seeable to them and to everybody that passed down on the road, looking at these 600 students going up on a hike. So one individual, we were making changes at this actual natural area to make it more accessible for people of all different walks of life. And in doing so, we had taken out some of the levels of difficulty in that particular hike. So what happened? Well, this really upset several members of the biking community because they loved and wanted to have those technical parts of the trail. And on seeing this big poster for natural areas, someone that was passing by, a technical biker passed by and wanted to share and vent his frustration. So he did. He stopped as we were leading up these 600 students and basically shared all the things that he thought were horrible about natural areas and all the things that he thought badly about what was happening. And I look back on that conversation and I really just wanted it to end. I really just wanted it to be over with because it felt so uncomfortable. And when I think about ways to connect with people, I could have thought about the shared values that we had. We both loved this open space. We wanted to be able to use it. We wanted to be able to connect with something that we both loved, nature. We just had two different approaches to that. So, how about you? Do you have a visitor interaction? For me, it's a visitor action that went, I could have thought it could have gone better. And so I really think about that and ways that I could have connected instead of just being like, thank you so much for sharing and wanting it to be over with. Gabby said, a child once asked me while watching a sea turtle leave to the water, do turtles miss their babies? Oh my gosh. What did you respond, Gabby?
Uh, that was something that after when explain the sea turtles how they leave their babies and they laying their eggs. Um, that was a very interesting question because I think that it connects to the values of family, home, love, for me, it was profound. I didn't know what to say. I said, well, the turtles live a very long life, so probably they're going to see each other again.
Thank you. I love it. Anyone else?
I was thinking in terms of being a trainer, we get this amazing opportunity to have the people we're interpreting to for 32 hours. And that gives those interpreters, gives our audience quite a bit of time to come in in a different mood, because they come in different days, be attracted to and find meaning in different pieces and parts. And so we don't get to we get to see them in their real selves rather than just that sliver of 2 hours or 10 minutes or a few minutes. And that has many wonderful parts to it, and it also can be very emotionally taxing on an interpreter, on the trainer as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Well, I wish that I would have had this framework when I was thinking about that engagement with the biker, because if I would have thought about what we both thought valuable, I could have gone back through and maybe connected with him in a different way. So this is the framework that I'm starting to use, that I've been working with over time. It's called the FAIR framework, and it's reimagining engagement by first finding common ground. And the way that I'm trying to find common ground in many conversation is to identify shared values. So we're going to start with that part today. We might be able to look at the A and the I and the R, but I think it's most important when you're thinking about your visitor, when you're thinking about your organization, and when you're thinking about yourself, to identify what your values are, what your organization's values are, and what the visitor's values might be. So I'm going to ask you to take a minute. I'm going to put this in the chat. I have a worksheet for you to look at and think about what values you have. And while you're doing that, I see that people put more information in the chat as well. So you might be able to look at this link. I'll give you 2 minutes to go through this. This is sort of the top 50 universal values that people have. They're also missing some. So if you see a value that you might have or that your organization might have, like conservation, you can look at a mission statement to get values for your organization as well. So take a couple minutes. You're going to put a heart next to your values. Pick 2 or 3. And then you're going to circle the values that your organization holds dear, or if they're not there, maybe add them in on those lines. And then you can star values that your visitor might hold dear when you think about them. So can everybody see that? Can you open it? Awesome. So I'll give you some time. I'll put on some music, and then we'll do some work.
Is the idea we create a copy of the document and then edit
Yes,
it?
thank you, Joanna. So yes, create a copy. Let me put that in there. Thank you. Oh, and there's Heather. Hi, good to see you.
You too. I love the trainers on this. It felt like the dream team.
All right, got just a little over a minute. We'll put some music on for you to fill it out. All right, now that you've done that, I'd like you to think about doing some mapping. Think about values that you might share with the visitor, values that you might share with the organization, and values that all three of you share. Where are you most likely to be in alignment? And if you're comfortable, unmute and I'll ask the other trainers to unmute. What values do you see overlapping? You, the visitor, and your organization. What might some of those values be?
So I think I was still kind of going through and thinking about where to put the hearts, but just looking at the list, I think, I work at a history museum. Stewardship is actually in our mission. Um, uh,
That's great.
Authenticity, because I think people, like, we strive to be authentic. People come to us, for authenticity, learning, connection, and then empathy, for people in the past and people today.
That's great. So authenticity, stewardship, and was it learning?
I wrote down like 5: stewardship, authenticity, learning, because I think
Yeah.
we want to educate people. People come to us to learn. Well, some people do. Some people come for the free bathrooms, whatever. Action, and empathy.
That's great. Thank you, Joanna. Who else would like to share?
Um, yeah, hi. Forgive me. I'm working on a tiny phone right now because my government computer wouldn't let me go on Zoom today. But yeah, I thought a lot about our ranger programs, and specifically, I was thinking earlier about also some of my after school kids in the Bronx and things like that. But I said for the shared values, learning, connection, respect, healing, hope, and curiosity. And sometimes it's just a matter of like tapping into people's curiosity to make them feel some of those other feel the respect for the earth and the parks here.
Yeah. I agree. And Judith, what I loved that you shared is that it really can be, even though they're universal, there are going to be some that matter more depending on the audience. That's why we teach audience in the interpretive guiding certificate as well, because it's important to know what they value and why they're there, whether it's just to use the bathrooms or to gain more knowledge, right? Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll mention something that occurred to me while I was doing this exercise, Monique, and feel free to put a pin in this if it's something you might talk about later. You just mentioned how, oh, now I'm going to miss your words. Well, let me just say it the way it occurred to me. I was noticing a lot of overlaps when I was thinking about a site that I used to work at and the audience I used to have. I'm not at a site anymore. I train full time. But when I thought about these values in terms of what we are doing at the time, if I am presenting or if I'm the one fielding a customer service moment like you had described, there are different values that are going to be more active because they are the ones that I'm bringing to bear to the situation. When I turned it around and I thought about this through the eyes of the visitor and put myself in the visitor's shoes, different things that I value started becoming more prominent. And I was particularly struck by this when I was thinking about belonging. And there's a couple that are variations on that theme. How, when I'm coming into a space, my desire to belong and feel welcome is very, very active.
Mm,
When I am providing a service, a talk, whatever in a space, there are other things that are more top of mind. And it's a shift I make into remembering the first thing that I need to do in this space is take care of that value of belonging. I relate to that, I share that. I need to elevate it more consciously because even though it's an overlap, our desires, our thought about it might be different and flex up and down as we move into different roles and in different moments. I
yeah,
don't know if that's something that's kind of part of this model or adjacent or not.
adjacent in when we think about Maslow's love and belonging, when we're looking at that hierarchy or ladder or even the continuum, that we all appreciate that to some degree. So whether that visitor didn't feel like he could belong there anymore because the technical parts were not there, creating a different way or seeing it in a different way where he felt like he could belong, or just being open to that possibility as well. That's great. Did I reflect what you were saying? Great. Selena says, that's what overlap with mine: connection, curiosity, patience, open-mindedness, and learning. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I really love thinking about this because we have situations that come up, and I put situations that come up where it's important to think about what those shared values might be. So I have an example, and I'm going to have us work on this together. Have you ever had someone interrupt you with over technical language or derail the flow of your conversation? So here's a scenario. You're leading a nature walk. One participant repeatedly interrupts you to connect with overly technical language, like, actually, that's not accurate. The Latin genus name has been updated recently, and it's important to mention that, or whatever that piece of information might be. Some possible values that you might share with this visitor that your organization has as well might be respect, humility, and curiosity. So these can then frame your response to this visitor. So if someone were to say, actually, that's not accurate, here's the new to updated name, the first response could value respect. And I don't know if you can see them if it's too small on your screen, but here's a possible response. I appreciate your expertise. You clearly have deep knowledge about this ecosystem. To help everyone follow along, let's save those discussions for afterwards so I can make sure that everyone feels engaged. That way, you as the interpreter feel respected and you're offering that same respect to the visitor. Possible shared value could be humility. You're absolutely right about those technical details. I'm trying to keep things accessible for everyone's background. Would you mind helping me by sharing your insights with individuals who want to dive deeper? Maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't. And your third response could be that curiosity that you share in common with the visitor. Your passion for science really shows. I can see others are curious about what you're saying. So let's finish this section first and we can circle back. So as you think about values that your visitors might have when you come into a situation that puts you off the rails or puts you into a different place, how can you get that conversation back on track while creating, as Kristen said, that belonging, that need to feel the esteem and care that we do on our programs? What about the tough historical question? And Joanna, I didn't know you were going to be on, so you might want to look at this and share more about this scenario. So you're giving a tour at a site tied to historical injustice. A visitor asks a question that oversimplifies or disregards context. The visitor statement is, why didn't they just fight back? I don't get it. So some possible shared values between you, your organization, and the visitor might be human dignity, truth seeking, and learning. So I don't know if these responses are too small or not. Can you see them? I'll just see by nods of heads. Are you able to see them, Kristen? Do you want to try and read the first response that connects the shared value of human dignity? And then Nikki, if you can read the next one.
Sure. Response 1, the human dignity response. Many people did resist in different ways. The systems were designed to make fighting back extremely dangerous, but people still found ways to maintain their dignity and push back.
Thank you.
All right. Second response from truth seeking. That's the key question. The reality was more complex. People had to make impossible choices with limited options. Let's look at what they were actually facing.
Thank you. And I don't know if you can see it, Joanna. I can't see you sometimes because of my screen, but can you read the third response or do you still have
Sure.
noise in the
Yeah,
background?
yeah, I'm okay. So response 3, learning. That's exactly what we're here to figure out. Understanding why resistance was so hard helps us learn from this history and recognize these patterns today.
Great, thank you. Well, I really thought about ways because I find that when we enter those question and response strategies, when we enter sort of those little statements that might derail us, really practicing those conversations when we consider what the multiple perspectives might be when people are coming into our programs, and even the counter arguments that come in when we're presenting, you have to practice, right? You have to practice what your response will be. You have to think about what values you have, the visitor has, as well as your organization has. And one thing that I've found, which I hope this shows up, is a virtual agent that you might be able to practice with online. So I wanted to share this conversation about bats, which is virtual. There's a website called DID, and I think I'll put it up when I can. But I'd like you to think about ways that you might be able to help your staff practice virtually. So hopefully you can hear and see this conversation. With this one is called the misinformed comment scenario. All right, let's see if I can get it started. Can everybody see the person on the nature trail leading us along? It's a bat walk. Here we go.
As night falls, we'll start to see bats emerge. These incredible pollinators and insect eaters play a vital role in our ecosystem. Even though they're often misunderstood, bats are some of the most agile and helpful animals out there.
Can bats spread rabies?
Yes, bats can carry rabies, but the incidence is quite low. Most bats are not infected, and they typically avoid human contact. It's important to keep a safe distance and not handle them. If you see a bat on the ground or acting strangely, it's best to contact wildlife professionals.
Wow, but am I supposed to believe bats are helpful?
Absolutely. Bats are incredibly beneficial to the environment. They help control insect populations by consuming large quantities of pests, including mosquitoes and agricultural pests. Additionally, some species are important pollinators and seed dispersers, contributing to healthy ecosystems. Understanding their role can help shift the perspective on these fascinating creatures.
But aren't bats blind? And don't they get stuck in your hair at night?
Bats are not blind. They have good eyesight and use echolocation to navigate and hunt for food. The myth about them getting stuck in hair is just that, a myth. Bats are agile flyers and tend to avoid humans. They're more interested in insects than in getting close to people.
All right. I don't know if anybody's seen this particular use of technology, but let me see if I can find the website and put it in there. I think it's probably a fascinating way when you think about question and response strategies and helping your staff practice those conversations that you know might come up on potentially sensitive programs. So I
It
just
sounds like you're exploring some interesting technology for enhancing communication.
So I hope that you get a chance to find it. I have used my free trial, but I think you could actually put different personas and agents. You can add background, you could add values that are important to you, the visitor, and your organization, and see what responses come up. Thanks, Gabby. I don't know if you've had a chance to try this. Gabby and I were talking about this the other day.
Yeah, I'm
So
fascinated.
it's fascinating. Is anybody else familiar with DID at all? It's fascinating. Also could be helpful on a closed loop situation with your organization. So sometimes people have the same values, but they might approach them differently. They might have the same value of learning or inquiry or spirituality, but they might approach it differently. So that's when you could acknowledge shared values, or you could just air it out. That's the A and the I and the R of the FAIR framework. And this is what we teach as well. When we're teaching the interpretive guiding course, you can acknowledge and validate the person. You could invite dialogue, or you could identify the emotion that's coming behind what someone's saying. And then you could reframe the conversation.
I have questions about that idea of reframing. It's often used as this idea of making people think the way I think. So can you talk about reframing as something different than that?
Yes, and give me an example of what you mean. Do you have an example that you want to use?
Let's say I work at a site that has um, a statement or a belief or a way of interpreting whatever, like this is how they feel, using that authority of the resource. This is how we feel about this. And so in some instances there could be a disagreement. The person's like, I don't agree with you, and the interpreter at the site is like, well, this is what, and we've all been trained in this authority of the resource. Like, we can come back to this person saying, hey, well, this is what we think. And to me, that's kind of there's a couple different ways of seeing reframing. So one way of reframing is to, like, okay, I'm going to work harder to get this person to agree with me. I obviously need to reframe my message so that they agree with me. Whereas another way to think of it is, how can we reframe this discussion so we're having a discussion rather than my agenda needs, me as an interpreter, my agenda needs to come first. So that's kind of what I was wondering about. I don't know if that helps.
I think about it as something you can look back when you reframe something that you both agree on and that you both think is important. So taking care of nature. Yes, Joanna, here's an idea. Be upfront about the reframing. Here's how we think about this, or here's another way of thinking about it. Yes. And I think, like, you can think about dogs on trail, dogs, off leash. That's probably one of the biggest, Katie was nodding. That's one of the biggest things that we see. And we also saw, when I was working at natural areas, we had over 56 natural areas, and there were only 6 that dogs weren't allowed on. And what happens? And there's signage everywhere that says, sorry, dogs aren't allowed. But people tend to show up with dogs. And this has happened several times. When we go to do school programs there, we'd see people walk up with their dogs and walk right past that sign that said no dogs, right? Have you had that happen before while you're showing up for a program? So I think you can do what Joanna says, letting people know, hey, we love dogs. I love dogs. It's that authority of the resource. It's something that we have in common. And let me give you, we don't have dogs in this site because it's a sensitive area for special species that are rare and endemic only to this part. So I'm giving them knowledge of why we don't allow it. And it's important that we keep dogs off so everybody, we can all enjoy this now and in the future. And here's some options for other places to go that are close by. So I love that you brought your dog out, and unfortunately, they can't come. So does that answer your question, Nikki?
No, actually, it showcases what my question is, that there's still and this is just philosophical. This you may not be able. Many of us probably would not be able to do this at our sites. You know, if you're working for a site, you've got to toe their, you know, you've got to toe their line, right? No matter what you feel about it, and but there also needs to be this opportunity for instead of just that, well, that's the way it is. And in some cases, it's just the way it is. But how can we create these opportunities where it's like, you know, we're hearing this a lot. Maybe we need to go back to our agency and go, what can we do? What can we do about this? We keep facing the same issue, and you know, people keep bringing their dogs here. What can we do about this? Is there other things that we can? Is there more we can put on the website? Is there more of a you know, educational campaign, or can we take their concerns back and try something different? Can we create fences in this sensitive area? Can, you know, and one of the ways I think of it is that where everybody comes together, that center of those three bubbles, if the visitor just stays there, they're not going to learn anything from it. If we just go, well, that's just how it is, without giving the ideas of where else they could go and why it's important, things like that, the visitors just they won't learn anything, right? If the agency only stays in that spot, they aren't learning what their constituents want, need, expect, and aren't changing with those times. If we also just stay there and we go, I'm just going to use the authority of the resource, are we really challenging ourselves as interpreters to reframe how we actually do dialogue in looking for curiosity rather than going, this is what you need to do? And
Good
this
point.
comes up, I think, in a lot of interpretation is, well, I'm educated, so I'm right about this. And is that really being fair?
I just wanted to add something to Nikki's points of view, which is very nice. And I'm listening, and then I get excited, right? Because I think that one of the things that we need to do is to teach that interpretive responses, which sometimes I heard that the way of responding is very, it comes to how can I say this, very like institutional, which is good. We know that we are there to support the organization and the or the institution, the park, etc. But how to change a little bit that response into an interpretive opportunity, an interpretive response. And I think that what you're saying, Monique, is beautiful because it requires a little bit more attention from the interpretive part to be able to find the value behind the value, the concern behind the words, right? And probably learn to take notes and report that. So why the visitor is complaining about too much walking? I mean, that's something that I will complain about. I'm not that I mean, okay, I like walking, but not too much. So, but probably is it why? So it's about safety, it's about comfort, um I don't know. So all of these little details of how to we find what is it going on behind just the words, because somebody that, sometimes we tag um a person like difficult, but it's not difficult, it's just the different set of values. It makes us have different points of view, yes, but it doesn't mean that it's difficult. And I think that many are like trained to be like that direct response, and then they just maybe we need to put more attention on that. How can we identify that? And I know, like you said, the common ground, a knowledge first, inform second, right? That's very important. I think I appreciate this,
Mm.
Monique, because it really sounds very familiar.
Yeah, I think, and then I love what Nikki said, finding out ways like, why is it important for you to bring your dog here as opposed to other places? Like, what's important about that to you? And it could be that they just didn't see the sign. Or it could be that this is close by, like Gabby said, and they didn't want to walk or drive. Or there could be other ways to figure that out. And Selena says, I agree with Gabby, having a conversation about being able to bring up the commonalities, for example, like safety and concern, looking at those shared values are important. I love that we're having this discussion because I think it's really important when we think about all of these, how we can use them and how we can draw more, as Nikki said, out of the visitor. Heather, go for it. I just saw your hand.
Oh, that's okay. I also love this philosophical conversation because what I get out of what Nikki said is like, you have to be careful not to, and I think we do this, and maybe it's still like we're thinking it's a good thing, but like a little bit of a manipulation of the way we want people to think. And so we're reframing it. And I don't know why this popped in my head, but there are so many things that go into this, right? Like even body language when you're talking to somebody, how you're talking to somebody, and then the para language, which I've recently learned about. And so I think about it all the time. And I don't know if you're all familiar with this, but like
Paralinguistics.
pitch. Yes, yeah, exactly. And so pitch, volume, pace, intonation, emphasis, pauses, and resonance, and just sort of how we're talking to people. And sometimes that can be cultural, right? Like sometimes they're literally, you're looking somebody in the eye, you're not looking somebody in the eye, you're talking really fast, whatever. So anyway, just that's all. I just love this discussion. And I think there are so many different ways you can affect this. Yeah, so thanks.
I appreciate that. And this isn't the only way. I think reframing is one way to be able to connect with the visitor, and it's not the only way. And I see stuff in the chat. I think perhaps there are different tools for different goals. Agreed. While we don't want to reframe the conversation away, what I really appreciate is the potential way to call people in to a willingness to actually use the conversation to explore rather than persuade. And that's where you can ask questions. What do you like about this place? Why is it important that you bring your dog here? And that comes from that shared value of curiosity, which many of us have personally, which our organizations hopefully have, and the visitor does as well.
One of the things that happens also in a conversation is there's kind of an opening, a window where people connect. Sometimes it's just eye contact, sometimes it's a smile, sometimes it's a complaint, and what happens at the end of a conversation is this, okay, where do we go from here? And so we've been talking about the word reframing. I wrote it because you only had the slide up there for a second, Monique, at the very beginning. So I'm like, what was the R again? And I put down recap because we could take that conversation and go, okay, I've got to go to lunch, or it's too hot. We need to get out of the sunshine, or whatever. So how do we take this conversation and go bye? Yeah, and it might be recapping the conversation, it might be reframing the conversation, it might be thank you, just finding a way to finish the conversation. And then I was also hearing Gabby use a different R word, and I didn't write it down fast enough. It was refining the conversation. And I was thinking about, and with any acronym, it's only as good as what you remember the pieces to be. So that gives a few more opportunities for what that R could be.
Well, thank you. And with that, we are at 45 minutes for our conversation, which has been a really good and helpful roundtable. I want to thank you all for sharing either in the chat or verbally as well. It's so good to be able to think and explore other ways to connect with our visitors and share our organization. We will have a meeting next month, hopefully with a guest, Rita, as the facilitator. She's right here. Rita Nethersoul, thank you so much for stepping in for that. We'll get to hear more about your topic and what you'd like to share as time goes on. But as we close, I'd like you to think about just hearing these conversations, a shift that might happen both within your program design and when you connect with visitors, and a practice you want to try. Thank you all so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time.